Oliver Stone's first big success was Salvador, about a secret war in Central America. Platoon won him an Oscar. His latest film now takes place in another kind of battleground, Wall Street.
Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Thank you very much.
And Oliver Stone now joins us from Los Angeles this morning. Good morning, Mr. Stone.
Good morning, Kathleen.
So, I don't remember a movie since China Syndrome that is quite as well-timed as this. Did you foresee this? The Black Mondays?
No, not at all. The movie, as you know, takes place in 1985, and it's really about a bull market. But the shadow of the slide, the Wall Street slide, was there in 1985. Some of the same problems were there, and they all came to being in this year, but we couldn't have predicted it. What
was the public acceptance over the weekend? What are your box office numbers?
Don't have the finals, but it was really terrific in the cities, fair in the outlying, outside the suburbs and the smaller towns, but hopefully they'll catch up.
I would just assume that Black Monday actually helped your box office, wouldn't you say?
It did to some degree. Of course, if it had gone all the way and started a major depression, I think that people would have soured on the concept of seeing something about Wall Street. So,
your father is a stockbroker?
He was, yes, for 50 years.
Did you use him as a technical consultant on this film?
No, he died. But we used quite a series of Wall Street brokers and investment bankers who helped us out.
There are a lot of people who see the storylines of Ivan Boesky in this, Jeff Winans in the Wall Street Journal, Heard on the Street scandal. Who is the Michael Douglas character?
It's really a composite of people. Yeah, there's quite a lot of Boesky. There's some of Jimmy Goldsmith, Carl Icahn, Asher Edelman. We talked to a whole series of men, Boone Pickens.
Is it true that a lot of people didn't want to let you in their offices when you were shooting here in New York because they didn't want to be associated with this movie?
Only in the beginning. We had there was reservations and fear about what the film was going to say, but we rewrote the script quite a bit. We kept working on it. We kept getting advice from technical people on Wall Street. We changed it, and at the end, the New York Stock Exchange let us shoot on the floor itself. They thought the script was balanced.
They actually opened up their arms to you?
Well, I don't know about that, but they let us shoot on the floor during business hours, which is sort of a first for movies.
Why did you insist that everything be on location in New York and that you not do any of the shooting on a soundstage?
Well, that's my personal preference. I have a problem on stages. It just seems, life seems very artificial and hermetic. And when you're out on the street in Wall Street, your actors, your crew are going down like everybody else to lower Manhattan in the daytime. They share in that energy, and something happens on the set. Also, you get close to the windows in an office, and you can actually see New York City there. It's not a translite where you have a fake city.
Who does it help more, the actors or the director?
It helps both of us. I think it helps the audience, too. I think the audience, especially now, wants more and more reality and naturalism in their films.
An awful lot of big stars in this film. Did you have any problems putting all those egos on one set?
No, not at all. None of them were really stars at the time that we made the movie. Michael Douglas certainly took off with Fatal Attraction, and Charlie Sheen, as always, since I've known him, been very humble. Darryl was easy to work with, and Martin Sheen was a delight. Hal Holbrook, Terrence Stamp, everybody pitched in.
What's your next project?
Can't tell you, Kathleen.
Yes, you can.
No, I'm really worried about you television people, because they make television movies faster than I can make a movie.
You're referring to broadcast news?
Have I seen it?
You mean television movies faster? Oh, you mean movies for television.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about movies about television.
No, they make them much faster than we can make features. Also, to be honest, I really don't know. I'm developing 4 or 5 different things, and I'm seeing which way it works out.
Well, congratulations on the what looks like the success of your movie over the weekend, Wall Street. Thank you, Oliver Stone.
Thank you.
Harry?
It's 12 minutes before the hour. Next on CBS.
It's Sunday morning on CBS, and here again is Charles Kuralt. Ron Powers thinks he sees a new trend in the movies, which I suppose, Ron, really is an old trend, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Do you remember those old previews of coming attractions trailers where the graphic always said, ripped from the pages of American life? We always knew that we were in for one of those social realism movies that showed how Burt Lancaster made the country tick. Well, then the movies changed, and for a long time we got to see how Sylvester Stallone made grenade launchers tick. Now they're back, and just in time, too, those gritty, wised-up, almost documentary films that dramatize and satirize American life. Public life, the life of jobs and power, ambitions, and their moral impact on the world. Just in time to start summing up the 1980s and this decade's great public struggle for America's soul. Two symbols of American public life in the 80s have been money and information. And two filmmakers have penetrated the inside of those realms and come back with riveting, accurate, admirable movies. Their titles tell it all: Wall Street and Broadcast News.
I want you to buy 20,000 shares of Blue Star at 15 1/8, 3/8 tops. And don't screw it up, sport. Think you can handle that?
Now, wait just a minute, Dad.
Well, sure. Now, what's worth doing is worth doing for money. It's a bad bargain if nobody gains. And if we do this deal, everybody gains.
Wall Street is the greatest suspender movie ever made. It's also a dark and brooding morality play, directed by Oliver Stone, who gave us Platoon. But its real power springs from the movie's dead-on sense of environment, its authenticity.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. You won't regret this.
Stone is the son of a Wall Street broker. He researched the movie like a journalist. He insisted that his actors inhabit the styles, the language, and the warlike atmosphere of the street. The resulting movie is a kind of report from a combat zone.
Give me guys that are poor, smart, and hungry, and no feelings. You win a few, you lose a few, but you keep on fighting. And if you need a friend, get a dog. It's trench warfare out there, pal.
We have a minute and a half. It's my responsibility to tell the control room and New York that we won't be ready. We'll be ready. In 84 seconds, 15 seconds.
Broadcast News comes from another director with experience on the inside, James Brooks, who once worked at CBS News. He later helped create the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Whoops. Whoops. Bobby, Bobby.
Like Wall Street, this movie overflows with authenticity. Yes, folks, network news people really are quite a bit like this.
Could you at least pretend that this is an awkward situation for you? Me showing up while you're getting ready for this date?
It's not a date. It's co-workers going to a professional conclave.
Unlike Wall Street, Broadcast News has a kindness about it. The movie satirizes the news business, but shows a rare compassion for the people in it. It manages to be accurate and enchanting at the same time. So help me, Jesse Helms.
What a feeling having you inside my head.
Yeah, it was an unusual place to be.
It's like indescribable. You knew just when to feed me the next line. You knew the second before I needed it. There was like a rhythm we got into. It was like great sex.
Wall Street and Broadcast News. Two excellent movies about how American public life works from the inside. Quite a difference
from controversial subjects. They made Oliver Stone going the other direction. He made Platoon about Vietnam, Wall Street about morality and money, Salvador about turmoil in Central America, and now back to Vietnam with Born on the 4th of July. I spoke to him recently about his latest film, which stars Tom Cruise in the true story of Ron Kovic, who came home from Vietnam a paraplegic.
Spit it out. You believe in demonstrators?
Huh?
What?
No.
Don't talk anymore? What, is this true? You don't think we're right?
I don't agree with everything you're saying, okay? I don't think you understand.
What does
I don't
Tommy know about
understand.
it?
Huh, Tommy? What is it? Want to bring down this country? Love it or leave it, Tommy. You know, you could just love it or leave it.
Ronnie, I mean, all they're trying to say, Ronnie, is they don't want more people to come back like you.
Oh, like me. That's easy for them to say. That's an easy excuse. But where were they when their country needed them? Where were they? Where?
Why the Kovic story? Of all of the myriad stories, I suppose, available, Vietnam stories from beginning to end that carry all the way through, why his story in particular?
Well, for me, and from my point of view, it sums up the whole experience. It goes from overweening sort of pride and in heroism, a hubris, a Greek hubris, a boy who wants to be #1. He wants to be John Wayne. He goes to Vietnam. His dream is shattered, and then he has to readjust all his life to another value system. And then he finds out, I suppose, in the end, that he becomes a greater kind of hero than he ever set out to be.
Mm. Even from the beginning of the movie, what I saw was I started crying almost from the very beginning scenes, because it took me, and I'm sure lots of the audience, back to a time when our notions of the future and our notions of ourselves were pretty pristine and pretty idealistic. And even from the beginning, as I saw those opening shots from the neighborhood in Long Island, I said, you're out to blow these myths to smithereens. I mean, that was some of the sense I had. I mourned for it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
So do I. I grew up in that period. I remember the 50s as being wonderful and warm, and I would all like to go back and be 8, 9 years old again and playing on the block. I mean, what happened, obviously, was the government, starting with the John F. Kennedy clip that we used, increasingly played a very strong political role around the world and lied to its people about what it was doing. And it was people like Ron Kovic and that working class that suffered the consequences of those lies. And Ron was a very honest boy. He was a true believer. When you lie to a kid like that and he finds out about it, the consequences are going to be enormous. He's not going to walk away bitter and say, you lied to me and you can get away with it. He came back and he was a fighter, and he fought the government. And I think it's better for us, and he set an example for people like us. And I hope the new generation, kids like Tom Cruise's age and younger, they don't know anything about Vietnam. They're not learning it in their schools. And I hope that with this film they're going to see a piece of their own history.
How is the Vietnam War essential to your own personal experience? That's the largest of all large questions. You served there.
You know, it hits you when you're 18, 19, 20 years old. I mean, it's a marker for the rest of your life. It screwed me up. It screwed a lot of kids up. We came back to this country, and we were out of sync. We were out of step with our own generation. We were, you know, in a sense, we were older. We had problems inside that we didn't want to discuss. I think the most shocking thing is that we fought a war over there, and if we survived, we thought it was over. We came back here, and we were slammed in the back of the neck because we didn't expect the war at home.
Battles to fight all over again.
Yeah, the families that didn't realize what had happened. Our classmates they were not hostile to us. This is a cliche. They were indifferent to us, you see. When I came back, people were just making money. They were running about their business, normal business life. The economy was booming, and Vietnam was basically a 5-minute clip on television. That was it.
You mentioned Tom Cruise. How did you come to decide that he was the one to do this? Because as you watch the film, it seems that there may be no other person who could have done it.
I think Tom was hungry to do it, and he wanted it. And he went after it. He went after me, and he went after Ron Kovic, convinced him he could do it. And I also sensed in Tom that there was a similar background to Ron. He was a driven, working-class Catholic background.
Was he even better than you imagined him?
Oh, Tom was amazing. He grew into the role in such a way. I mean, we always knew he had the beginning of the role down, the youth, the cockiness.
Gung-ho.
The desire to be #1. I mean, I don't think I would have, you know, the chief Boy Scout, but we questioned whether he would be able to go that distance, the second part of the movie. And
let's go. Am I looking really good? Yeah, I look good.
Well, you one crazy Marine, Kovic.
So gung-ho and everything.
He amazed all of us. I think he did a splendid job.
Salvador, Platoon, born on the 4th of July. I'm curious, just as an Oliver Stone watcher, to know Wall Street. What drives you?
You know, I probably don't see the whole picture as clearly as maybe an analyst does, but I move from picture to picture by my interest. I get interested in people, the person, Ron Kovic, or the character in Wall Street, or Richard Boyle in Salvador, myself in Platoon. I'm fascinated by the self, or some version of it. I think my new picture is about Jim Morrison of The Doors, who was one of the most contradictory, enigmatic personalities of my generation. He was a hero to me. He was about 25, and I was 21 when I got back from Vietnam. I heard his music. I found the music to be completely different than the most of the rock music of that time. He was dealing with issues of sex and death and our psyche and disturbing material and the darker side of rock and roll. So here I find a character that's I would like to make a movie about.
Are you a chronicler? Are these your artistic interpretations? Are you a provocateur? I mean, do any of those things apply as you see yourself?
I think I make movies about a person, a human being. That's where I start from, a person that undergoes some sort of change, a changing self, if you want to call it that, a threatened self, a self that is able to grow, and it takes many forms, but I don't set out to be a provocateur. No. It seems that's part of a background, and if your idea is strong and it's going to involve some extremities, there's going to be conflict, and maybe that conflict is what makes the films hard to take, or strong films.
Born on the 4th of July, Oliver Stone, a film as moving, I think, as I have ever seen. Thank you so much. We'll be back.
A movie about Jim Morrison and the Doors is John Leonard's subject this morning. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Charles.
I confess, the Doors were a phenomenon I missed somehow.
Well, it happened to me by weird proximity. My oldest friend, who's a professor of political science, taught Jim Morrison at UCLA in the 60s and made me listen to the music. And then my own daughter, when she was in high school, was a roadie in a rock band and wrote all of her high school essays on Jim Morrison and the Doors. And then she went to college and graduate school and switched from Morrison and the Doors to Martin Luther and the Reformation. I don't know what this means. I wanted the 60s to be the Yellow Submarine, and these guys went out into the desert and looked at snakes, so we shall see. In a wonderful article in Esquire magazine, Eve Babbitts calls Jim Morrison a Bing Crosby from hell. He could always hold a tune. What he couldn't hold was his liquor and his death wish. Babbitts had a fling with Morrison back in the 60s when the Doors lit everybody's fire. She saw him kill himself, like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin. But if the Lizard King is dead and buried in the Père Lachaise necropolis in Paris, the Doors live on. They made one comeback in 1979 when their music was used in Apocalypse Now. They'll make another one now that Oliver Stone has obsessed about Morrison at lurid length and high decibels. Stone's new movie has everything you ever wanted to forget about the 60s rock and roll. Alcoholism, heroin addiction, Oedipal rage, indecent exposure and impotence, Nietzsche, William Blake and Andy Warhol, American Indians and Celtic witches, bad poetry, and leather pants. Think of the Doors as the dark satanic flip side of La Bamba.
A minor, B minus, jazz.
Yeah, man, yeah.
Time to hesitate is through. Some kind of intro.
No time to wallow in the mire.
Val Kilmer is a persuasive Morrison, running to fat and demons. He even sounds surprisingly like him.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
No, I like it.
Baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
Oh, Jim. Oh, God, you know, I cooked the stuff.
Oh, baby,
and
it's okay.
people are coming.
Meg Ryan also looks a lot like Pamela Corson, Jim's punching bag, a smackhead who only lasted 3 years longer than the Lizard King.
No,
Oh, no, it's cool. We'll trip and then we'll eat our feast.
Yeah, sure. No.
You know,
no.
I think it's a good thing about Ray and Dorothy.
Everything's gonna flame, man. The planet is screaming for change, Morrison. We gotta make the myths.
Kyle MacLachlan is terrific as Ray Manzarek, the keyboard and the brains behind the band. They run around and make noise in L.A., Haight-Ashbury, the Mind-Blown Desert, London, England, and New Haven, Connecticut, where Morrison's arrested for the first time.
No. Say your thing, man. Mr. Morrison, you've gone too far. The show's over. You violated state obscenity laws under arrest. There you go.
The second time will be in Miami, after the dance of the Indian ghosts, a carnival of death.
Trying to run, trying to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through the other side.
The fascination of The Doors as a movie is that Oliver Stone throws his own unconscious all over the screen. Stone so much identifies with an imaginary Morrison, the romantic myth of the doomed poet, martyr, scapegoat, Dionysus and Jesus Christ superstar, that he turns himself into exactly the sort of shaman Morrison aspired to be. Out of control, he hallucinates. As in Platoon, as in Born on the 4th of July, so in The Doors. For Stone, what the 60s were about was Edge City, the primal trip, sex and death. Never mind that The Doors as a band were never really political, nor that Morrison himself, the son of an admiral, a film school dropout, was more of a Rod McEwen than a Rambeau, and a self-destructive drunk besides. Nor that a lot of children went crazy and died, nor that the 60s were also about the Beatles and gentle survivors like Joan Baez and Allen Ginsberg. These are contradictions that Oliver Stone hasn't resolved. He has used them instead to mug us where we sit, in the gorgeous dark. We feel something, all right. We just can't think
Jim
anymore.
Morrison is long dead. His rock group, The Doors, long gone. But they're brought to life again in Oliver Stone's new movie, The Doors. In his weekly review, our critic Gene Siskel joins us now from WBBM TV in Chicago to tell us what he thinks of the movie, The Doors. Good morning, Gene.
Good morning, Paul, and I liked it very much, and I think that one of the reasons why Jim Morrison comes alive in this film has to do with Val Kilmer's performance. This is an Oscar-caliber piece of work. He's doing a difficult task, always a difficult task, of recreating someone who we know very well visually through news reports and through music videos in this case, and he's also singing much of the work and singing it flawlessly. So this is a real good chance to see an extraordinary performance. This is directed by Oliver Stone, part of his trilogy now of 60s films, Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, this focusing on the music scene back home during the Vietnam War, and here we see The Doors recording their big hit, Light My Fire.
Bruce, you feel it? An album of killer music in 6 days, man. 6 days, baby. Unreal.
The time to hesitate is through. The time to wallow in the mire. China, we can only lose. And our love become a funeral pyre. Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
And focusing on Jim Morrison, who, as you said, died at age 27 in a Paris bathtub in 1971. The picture clearly documents what went wrong in his life. The guy had a serious drinking and drug problem. And we see that also in his destructive relationship with his girlfriend, played by Meg Ryan. This is not one of Meg Ryan's best either roles or performances, kind of whiny. But we see, if we focus on Val Kilmer in this scene, the desire basically to push the limits too far.
You said you wouldn't drink today.
No, Ma, I ain't drinking.
You promised you wouldn't drink anymore. You're not going to drink anymore, are you, Jim?
No, Ma, I ain't.
And you're going to change those stinky leathers you've been wearing for the last 3 weeks.
Nah, I don't know about that.
What are you on?
Ooh, it's just some low-grade acid, not heavy.
Oh, Jim. Oh, God, you know, I cooked the stuff.
Oh, baby, it's okay.
And people are coming, you know? Ray and Dorothy think that we're flaky enough, and you said that we would wait until after, and now you're gonna peek before me.
No, it's cool. We'll trip, and then we'll eat our feast.
When she says, "Oh, Jim," that I can't do that voice. It's really kind of grating. But what I think works in his character is that we see the downside of the 60s. We see the visionary quality of the 60s, Morrison viewing himself as some kind of Indian medicine man, leading the tribe of young people, but at the same time unable to lead his own life personally and destroying it. The last hour of the picture, as we used to say in the 60s, a downer, but that is, of course, reflecting what went on with his life and so many other people in the 60s. I think it's a very strong film by Oliver Stone, both a tribute to the 60s and a cautionary tale, and very well done. The music is exceptionally recorded. If you wondered why those black bands were at the top and bottom of your screen while we were watching that clip, it's because he wants to show us the full widescreen film that he made, and that's the way you can show it on television. Paul?
But does Oliver Stone really have anything fresh to say about the 60s? Anything we haven't seen before?
Well, I tell you, I haven't seen too often, except in an English film called Sid and Nancy, the dark side of the 60s presented this clearly. And I would recommend, if you want to screen a companion film from the other side of the ocean, Sid and Nancy, involving the Sex Pistols. I think you're going to get a good era there of a decade of destruction and also creativity, destruction through drugs. So I think that it may be familiar turf, it's just presented exceedingly well by him.
All right. Thanks, Gene. Nice to see you again. And we're going to be back right after this.
This morning's Gene Siskel segment was sponsored by Sue Bee Honey, the good taste that's good for you.
Meg Ryan of When Harry Met Sally and Twin Peaks star Kyle MacLachlan are on screen together in the rock hit The Doors. Our Steve Kometko spoke with them about the movie and the 60s rock scene.
Come on, baby, light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
The music of The Doors helped ignite the raucous spirit of the 60s. Jim Morrison's alcohol addiction and drug experimentation inspired dark lyrics taunting death. His body gyrated, his mind reeled, while his popularity soared.
Hello, I love you, won't you tell me your name?
Turn around, man. Come on, let him in, Jim.
I thought that I was in your arms, country in your eyes.
Now, 20 years after a heart attack claimed the life of the Lizard King, director Oliver Stone shines the spotlight once again on the musicians who became The Doors.
You write this? You got others in here?
Bunch, man. I got a whole concert in my head, you know. I see it all, Ray, like...
What the hell happened to you in the desert, man?
You know, ecstasy,
Let's get a rock and roll
madness.
band together and make $1 million
So much
bucks.
stuff, Ray. Got tons of songs.
Things are about to explode, Jim. You can feel it in the air. People want to fight or love or kill. Vietnam is right out there, man. Sides are being chosen.
Val Kilmer portrays the self-destructive Morrison, and Kyle MacLachlan, a trained classical pianist, plays keyboardist Ray Manzarek.
What was odd for me was the experience of the performance, being in front of the audience. And I think at one venue there were 4,000 people, and we were performing for, you know, it was as if we were the real band, you know. The impact of that was the thing that altered me the most. That energy, that immediate transfer of energy between crowd and performer. Different than movies, different than theater. I had never experienced it before, and it was like a drug. It was very addictive. I was hooked. I wanted to.
So will we now see you branching out into a music career?
Right. Hey, no, there's no way, man. I don't have the talent for that. But it was a great thing to experience in that make-believe world.
You promised you wouldn't drink anymore. You're not going to drink anymore, are you, Jim?
No, mine.
And you're going to change those stinky leathers you've been wearing for the last 3 weeks.
Nah, I don't know about that.
Morrison shared his hedonistic lifestyle with longtime girlfriend Pamela Courson, who is played in the film by Meg Ryan. Courson died of a drug overdose just 3 years after Morrison.
I think she's a victim of her own identity crisis, that she never really was able to grasp onto who am I in this place, not in terms of him, just in terms of me. just felt badly for her. And I think that she also had she was kind of dippy and flaky and kind of fun to be around, and she loved somebody so much that she didn't know when to stop to protect herself.
The Doors is not so much the story of success as it is about the price of excess. Recreating the pain and disorientation of an addict proved to be a brutal test of endurance for Ryan.
There was a lot of these dark forces rolling around, and I still, like, if I hear the music, I go back into that same kind of, like, feeling like I'm under 8 feet of water.
Hard to shake this?
Yeah, really hard to shake this.
McLaughlin, too, felt the need to recover from the surreal world of self-indulgence, sex, and hallucination that is depicted in The Doors.
I felt like I'd been hit by a train, and you really sit there with the breath knocked out of you. The impact of that, of having had an experience as opposed to witnessing, as opposed to watching something, it's an experience.
The experience of making The Doors now behind them, Ryan and McLaughlin agree they're glad the end is here. Reporting from Hollywood, Steve Kometko, CBS This Morning.
5 minutes before the hour, we'll be right back.
Wall Street, Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, Salvador. All movies written and directed by Oliver Stone. All of them deal with subjects central to that generation that came of age in the 60s, from drugs to greed, from war to remembrance. His next film deals with the music, the one after that, the Kennedy assassination. The images and ideas of Oliver Stone are a mirror to an American age, expressed in the most American of all art forms.
Is movie making, given the number of people involved, is it art or is it a kind of serious, clever commerce?
Probably from your point of view, it's commerce. I don't know how you regard it. I've always regarded it as serious business, and that, you know, it's a lifelong interest of mine. It's a commitment. I'm putting my best of myself out there. I'm trying my hardest. I'm trying to understand the world through movies. I'm trying to shape the world through movies, reshape it.
Have movies become the literature, you think, of this generation?
When I write a script, I try to put my heart in the script, to speak as a poet would speak. I think as long as there is that guiding vision, respect for the origin, that will come through in the movie, and it will be as valid as a piece of literature.
The successful artist at work, sedate, comfortable, 44 years old, making the movies he wants to make, his own stories. 'Twas not always thus. His own story, an allegory for his generation. Rich, unhappy kid, seeker of approval of distant stockbroker father. Dropout, wild man, drug-frazzled Vietnam vet. And then, as in all fables, an overnight success, an Academy Award for writing Midnight Express. And as with all outlaws, that was not enough.
And I always knew the ball game is to direct the thing, is to write and direct it. And once you've proven that you can direct your own material successfully, with some modicum of box office coming in, box office income, that's the solution to freedom.
No.
Freedom, if there is such a thing in movie making, came in 1986 with the release of both Salvador and Platoon. Salvador was his story of a rogue journalist confronting the violence and corruption of Central America. It was acclaimed. But Platoon was a phenomenon, a critical and financial blockbuster. The first film, it was said, to show Vietnam as it was. It was Oliver Stone's own story, played by Charlie Sheen, the rich kid who's not drafted, but volunteers.
I went because I felt that it was important for me to see in my lifetime a war, to be a combat infantry, and not to be an officer. I felt it was very important to be at the lowest level.
I volunteered for it. You do what? I figured why should just the poor kids go off to war and the rich kids always get away with it?
Oh, I see. What we got here is a crusader.
I think I had a very strong death wish. I was a troubled kid. My parents had been divorced. There were problems in the family, and I wanted to get away from the family. I certainly felt very strong feelings of there was no point in growing up, in going on and becoming an adult, but that the world had nothing to promise.
Well, if you were that much adrift before Vietnam, I could see how the war could make you really believe that there wasn't much point in living.
It sparked me the other way. It made me aware of what death really is. I smelled death, I saw it, and it hit me very hard. I made a commitment to life, I think, and I said, I want to get out of here. I want to make it out of Vietnam.
15 months later, twice wounded and decorated for bravery, Stone left Vietnam. In Platoon, he tried, at the very end, to make some sense of the madness he'd been through.
Those of us who did make it have an obligation to build again, to teach to others what we know, and to try with what's left of our lives to find a goodness and meaning to this life.
Noble thoughts. In fact...
You came back from Vietnam a bit of a wreck, right?
Yeah.
He was barely home a week when he was arrested on drug charges and thrown into jail. He finally pulled himself together, went to film school, and came at least partially to terms with Vietnam.
I realized we were just, in a sense, ghosts in their landscape, that we were marching through their history. And we were just a brief flicker of white faces in the day, and we were gone. Ultimately, we didn't mean anything geographically, socially, politically to the region. We were forgotten. It's 20 years old now. And accepting that conclusion was good for me.
In a certain way, Vietnam really shaped you as an artist.
It shaped me as a political person. As an artist, it gave me a sense of the visceral, the sense of reality, of smell, of touch, of feel. I started to see the world in much more visual and sensual terms as a result of being there. It shaped me as, yes, it did. You're right.
There is a muckraking quality to all of Stone's work. The journalist unfettered, allowed to say what he wants through barely fictional characters. The Wall Street he knew as a child was a noble place, the place his father worked.
You're a part of something here, bud. The money you make for people creates science and research jobs. And sell that out.
He believed in the power of productivity, of making things, investment and profit and initiative. And he ingrained those beliefs in me early in my life.
Wall Street, the movie, cataloged the beliefs of the Roaring '80s through the character of Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas. The ethic is not work or productivity, just greed.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
I'll never forget at the premiere of Wall Street in New York, I'd invited a bunch of Wall Street people, and Michael Douglas had invited Donald Trump and people like that, and they sat through the movie, and I could see that the audience was really rooting for Michael. And at the end of the show, you know, Donald came out, I think, and he said to me, you know, I like that Gekko.
Stone has received scorn as well as praise. In Born on the 4th of July, he was accused of playing fast and loose with the facts of the life of Ron Kovic, a paraplegic Vietnam veteran. Stone showed Kovic, played by Tom Cruise, being beaten and knocked down and arrested at the 1972 Republican Convention in Miami. But Kovic wasn't beaten or arrested in Miami.
But he was arrested in Los Angeles and 7 or 8 other places. He was beaten in Los Angeles. He was thrown from the wheelchair. So I think that I was not violating the spirit of that time.
Go ahead, old man, smoke it.
Drugs are in a lot of your movies. How destructive a force in your life were drugs?
I think that drugs have played a very ambivalent role in my life. They've been very creative and they've been very destructive. They work both ways. Certainly freed my mind up very much in the 60s. But it would be wrong, through a 1990s perspective, to look back and say drugs were so horrible. They weren't. They taught us a lot.
Elizabeth is Oliver Stone's second wife. They both used drugs, including cocaine, but now say all that is over. They live reasonably contented, prosperous lives in any one of their 3 houses. They have a child, 5-year-old Sean.
What would you tell them about drugs, for example?
Depends on the drugs and how old he was. I think cocaine is very destructive, and crack. But I think there are some very strong drugs that are out there that the good Lord made. He put them in nature.
If that sounds like a bit of familiar 60s rhetoric, well, Stone is in that mode these days.
Riders on the storm. Riders on the storm.
His new film is about Jim Morrison and the Doors. The outlaws of rock music, who for some made excess, sex, drugs, outrageous behavior into a form of spirituality. Val Kilmer plays Jim
Do you think you
Morrison.
could do that strut Indian-like? It was for me a wonderful freedom to be able to go back and be a Jim Morrison fan again, and be 21 and listen to the music. And there was something very mysterious about Morrison, and to capture that, to try to capture that on film. This has been a great year. I'm enjoying it because I'm getting to be young again, you know. Rock and roll.
What I see in all his films is that Oliver identifies very strongly with his main characters. When an actor becomes that character, there is a special relationship that I see that develops between them. And they both sort of get into each other's heads, and the character emerges out of that union. When we were first together, and I didn't know him that well, we would have these intense fights at night. And the next day I'd be typing, and I would recognize that the dialogue I was typing was actually the argument we had had the night before. And what he'd been doing was seeing what a genuine reaction was to this character's plight.
Hey! Yeah, let's lose the track.
Stone is in the final stages of the Doors movie. On the set, he can be a loving, tender father and husband, and a demanding, arrogant tyrant. In the early days, Elizabeth was his assistant, his typist, and gopher. She's graduated to photographer. But success, she says, has not totally tamed him.
He likes to shake people's cages. He actually likes to rattle people up, and you get sort of an honest response out of him.
I'm told that that temper of his can reduce people to tears.
Oh, sure. He's a very persuasive and powerful individual, very charismatic, and when he encourages you, you feel like you're on top of the world, but it hurts, you know, when he lashes out.
I mean, I have time for you to be perfect. I'll be here till next year for you to be perfect. All right, one more, that's it.
It has been said of you by those who love you most that you do like to rattle people's cages.
Yeah.
Shake them up.
Yeah, but not by, that's by...
So it's true.
That's the only way you get some truth, no? I mean, you have to get past the veneer. You have to get into their souls, their eyes.
To what extent do you enjoy the idea of being an outlaw?
I do and I don't. I'm a very conflicted individual. I have alternate periods of conformity, and then moments where I want to break away from it and do something radical and restart my life again, you know. I want to strip away old friends and find new friends. I have this vision of Gauguin going out to the South Seas, you know, at the age of 40, in his 40s, and starting a third life.
His fears are getting stale and stodgy. He sees that as the demise of America, basically. Tedium, boredom.
Middle age, it's called.
I started feeling middle age about 37, 38, and had a lot of sleepless nights about it. Death is coming on, and I feel it. But then again, I saw death quite a bit when I was 18, 19, and 21 in Vietnam, and I know that I'm luckier than a lot of the guys that were over there to have made it back. So for me, it's a little bit of gravy, you know? This whole life has been gravy.
The Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade, or your money back. Hold it. The Remington microscreen is more than closeness. Listen. That powerful motor makes Remington a quick shave, and its two thin, flexible screens adjust for true comfort. The Remington microscreen, quick, comfortable, shaves as close as a blade, or your money back. Atta boy. That's Remington. And the perfect gift for women is the Lady Remington Rechargeable, also with a money-back guarantee.
It's gonna taste chalky, but the flavor. Sold.
It started with a hand, because shape and feel are as significant as lens and shutter. Introducing the Infinity Super Zoom 330 from Olympus, where great pictures and great design go hand in hand.
60 Minutes, a CBS News weekly magazine, will continue.